So, as a psychiatrist, I've seen it often in patients, but now I'm experiencing it personally myself too. Sense of loss. It's a genuine grief because we had a dream that for the first time a woman would be the leader of the most powerful nation on earth. A woman would hold the most powerful position on earth, and we would all say, Madam President. Every one of our sisters, our mother, our daughters get this sense that there are no barriers anymore, that a woman belongs anywhere, including at the very top. Just the sensation of watching her put her hand on the Bible and take the oath of office, to be referred to as Madam President, to step into the Oval Office, to realize her power. She was there. We could feel it. All of those scenes of her giving her inaugural speech, of her at the inaugural balls dancing away in the way that she can, all of those things were flashing before our eyes. We could feel them as if they were in the present. And now, just like that, within a couple of hours, they disappeared. The whole thing vanished. The universe we believed we inhabited just disappeared. How did that happen? The feeling it leaves us with is a feeling of genuine grief, because we really have lost something. And yes, you can say we've lost a dream, but we lost a reality that we lived in, that we breathed in, that we were excited by, that we were inspired by, that we believed our children would be inspired by, and future generations would remember. And we were there to see that historic moment, and we've lost it. And that sense of grief now, we can feel it physically in our bodies, as if there's an elephant sitting on our chests. And there are so many of us, not just in the States, but around the world, feeling that right now. Now, I sometimes advise patients, and forgive me for the slightly unsavory metaphor, but I sometimes advise patients that grief is a bit like constipation. It will come out whenever it comes out. We can't force it out, we can't keep it in either, we can't push it and we can't suppress it. It will come out in its own way, in its own time. And we have to allow for that. If we are going to progress in any way, we have to start with this, allowing that grief to come through us. Because we're not going to be any good to anybody if we start taking action as a way to really unconsciously just avoid the grief. We have to start by feeling the grief, feeling what that's done to us, what it's done to our bodies, how we are reacting to it in real time. And that's the first part of our mission, to really feel the grief. I have experienced many people who have become ill in terms of their mental health through a lack of grief, but I've never experienced anybody who's experienced too much grief. In reality, grief is natural. It's an inevitable process when we lose something that we cherished, and we have. And so we have to allow ourselves to go through that process, to experience those actual steps of grief. And yes, it might start with denial. You can't believe it. But we're not the other guy who won the election. We're capable of going past that. We're not going to live in denial. And that's just followed by bargaining and negotiating, and then after that, just that sense of pure loss and devastation. Joe Biden actually described it well, because he's a man who's really experienced a lot of grief in his life, deep personal way. And he describes it as a black hole in your body that you feel you're about to fall into yourself. And that's exactly how it does feel, like a black hole in the center of your chest. And you feel it's about to swallow you, and you feel so much heavier as a result. Like it's in the same way that a black hole sort of distorts gravity. You feel like gravity is distorted. You can't lift yourself up, get out of bed. But again, all those things are natural. Allow yourself to feel them. You're not going to be any good to anybody unless you look after your mental health first. And that's how we do it, allowing the grief to come and pass through us. I remember reading Hillary Clinton's biography after she had lost the election, been in a similar state. And she talked about how difficult it was to even get out of bed for the first few days, and how she really couldn't bring herself to be active again with the same energy she had before for weeks. And I remember when I read that thinking, you know, it's only a woman that would be so honest in her biography. I've never read another politician's memoirs talk so honestly about the impact on their mental health of losses and traumas they've experienced in their political life. But she did. And that's why I was so hopeful that we will have a woman president again, and we will have one now. And losing that is a genuine experience of grief. And it affects us on every level. It affects our feeling towards ourselves, our actual physical inhabitation of our body, our feeling of energy, even our appetites, our sleep. And again, all those things are natural. They only become pathological or difficult or problematic if we're trying to push them away. And then actually things start to flare up, because you can't push away what is natural, what is meant to happen. And that's what I am doing and trying to do, and recommend to others to do right now as well. I feel myself running away from this big blotch, this sort of entanglement in the middle of my chest, this sadness. You know, I try and watch the podcasts, watch YouTube videos of people I admire, the Pod Save America guys and MSNBC, and that's all great. But at the same time, none of it should be trying to get me away from that feeling I have. I have to let it through me, let it process by just being with it. So that's the first step. Only a couple of days after this devastating result, we need to give ourselves that space. And the next step will come. If we take that step, then the next steps will come in terms of the energy we need to find to galvanize ourselves again, to get up off the floor and to start to fight back. start to resist, and that is all of our duties around the world, because the consequences of this victory will be felt, this defeat, victory for the wrong people and defeat for the forces of reason and compassion. The forces of that are going to be felt around the world, and all of us are going to have to fight back in various ways. But we can only do that if we look after ourselves first, like the old metaphor of the oxygen that comes down in emergency situations in a plane. We have to put the mask on ourselves first before we can put it on anybody else. So that means looking after our mental health right now and being present with our grief. And then we can start to take the next steps once that process comes through. And just like constipation, again, sorry for the not great metaphor, but just like constipation, it will come in its own time and its own pace. And we have to allow that to happen. And the next steps are going to involve something very different, because the climate we are now in and about to enter is very different to anything we've ever experienced. So we need to recruit to gain the energy and strength in order to face it. And in a future video, I'm going to talk about what it is that I believe we need to do. Because we're going to face things that we've never faced before, we need to do things that we've never done before either. And that means not just resorting to traditional playbooks, not just thinking about things that have gone in the past in terms of how we've tried to fight back crises, like 2004, for example, when Bush won re-election. That was obviously shocking too. We had no idea that that was like a pale trauma compared to what we're about to experience like 20 years later. But here we are, 2024. Now, what we need to do is something different to anything we've ever done before, because we're in a place we've never been in before. And we're in a place in which truth is no longer agreed upon. There are different versions of the truth. There are different versions of reality across different people. And in our progressives, in the States and in the world, we have a version of truth, but there are others who don't even accept that. In fact, we can shout and bleat, spend $1 billion on a campaign, and yet none of that truth, none of that dialogue, none of that communication is going to get across to the people in the different bubbles who have their own separate realities. And that means we have to think very differently about how we approach going forward. And furthermore, the reason these bubbles exist is partly because so many people lack a sense of political agency, and that's what needs to be tackled. And that is something that is profound and very different and very much more deep-seated than any of the typical solutions that people are coming up with already. And I'm going to talk about that in future videos. And if you'd like to hear it, then please do like and subscribe this video, because I intend to make many more like this about mental health, but also about philosophy and politics and what we can do to fight back and to be a real resistance in the States and around the world. So do like and subscribe, and I look forward to hearing from you and connecting with you in future videos. My name is Razzaque, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you, however hard it might be. Let's keep going.